All right, let's talk about hurricane formation in the Atlantic Basin. That's really where it's at for us here in the Middle Texas coast. Start off with daytime heating in the tropics, unstable air. Temperatures cool with height, produce thunderstorms, and those thunderstorms continue to grow and coalesce. We have a lot of different scenarios that help this. We also talk about winds not shearing much with height. That allows the storms to grow without falling apart or without being sheared across. We also talk about warm sea surface temperatures. The sea surface has to sustain at least 80 degrees to continue this development. Important factors, when they all come together, we will lead to organized tropical storm development in the form of a tropical depression. These are circulations, a closed circulation with winds of less than 38 miles an hour. As it continues to intensify, we develop a tropical storm. The tropical storm has circulation with winds 39 to 73 miles an hour, and as it continues under favorable environment, we develop a hurricane. Hurricane has sustained winds of 74 miles an hour or more. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other elements of this. The time of year it forms. Now we've already had Tropical Storm Ana back in May. That's very unusual. In fact, it's not a lot of hurricanes that develop May, June, and July, but it really ramps up in August and peaks in September before dropping off a secondary maximum in late October. Now, why is all this? Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. In June, we have most of our tropical storm activity in the warmest areas. That will be the Gulf of Mexico and also down in the Western Caribbean. In addition to that, we also have a small element of storms that developed where Ana did. That is back in the Gulf Stream in the southeastern part of our country. As we move on into the July time frame, much of the same areas are going on here. We've got the Gulf of Mexico very busy this time of the year, but we also have the Western Caribbean as well. We're looking at that in addition to now not only a slightly enlarged area southeast of the United States, but we've also got another area developing, and that's out in the western tropical Atlantic, starting to see some warmer sea surface temperatures during July. By August, all these things are coming into play. We have the Gulf of Mexico very busy this time of the year. We also have the Western Caribbean busy this time of the year. But things have now changed now. We've got a warmer Atlantic Ocean in August, and a large area of real estate may produce a hurricane. Now let's move on to September. This is our peak month, and we have to really be careful about trapping the tropics in September, and it all has to do with where the Bermuda High is located. The Bermuda High, if it's in the eastern area, will allow storms to recurve into the North Atlantic. If it situates itself further to the west, those storms may attack the Atlantic coastal areas, and the folks along the Atlantic seaboard may be in trouble. As this develops further west, now we're starting to look at things going all the way from the Cape Verdes into the Gulf of Mexico, and they could be affecting us. These are the storms, and these are why they hit us here in all kinds of times. Now we're talking about Category 1 hurricanes. An example is Claudette in 2003. Category 2, an example is Ike in 2008. Category 3, an extensively damaging storm example would be Alicia in 1983 or Celia in 1970. Category 4 storms are incredibly devastating storms, and an example of that is Carla in 1961. And the Category 5 storms in a rare event, an example is Andrew in 1992. In the late 1800s, Indianola was a bustling fishing port. Its industry was shattered in 1875 when a major hurricane came through this area, and before the citizens knew it, it was too late. More than 400 of them perished. After rebuilding the community in 1886, an even more powerful Category 4 hurricane wiped Indianola off the map. It was effectively never rebuilt. The citizens were too afraid to return. Finally, in 1961, after the community had regenerated to a degree, Hurricane Carla came through here and again wiped out civilization. Its 170-mile-per-hour winds were accompanied by a 20-foot storm surge. That's the equivalent of a 2-story building. To understand the force and the power of a 20-foot storm surge, Here's John Metz.
Out of the 4 hazards associated with hurricanes, storm surge is the deadliest. The areas that are shaded in a color could potentially be inundated by ocean water in a landfalling hurricane. If a hurricane were to move in just south of Victoria, the greatest surge would be pushed up through San Antonio Bay, up the Guadalupe River, up the San Antonio River, up the Victoria Barge Canal. It could conceivably push a storm surge all the way up to the turning basin at the Port of Victoria. Yes. So those are hazards, those are things to be aware of. In addition, you can see that 2/3 of Calhoun County is potentially inundated. It's a very low elevation county. So the communities of Seadrift, Port O'Connor, Indianola, Magnolia Beach, extremely vulnerable to surge. Even on the other side of Lavaca and Matagorda Bay, the Port Alto areas,
Olivia's in there.
Very low elevation. So you need flood insurance if you're in these areas. It's highly recommended. Evacuate if called to do so.
And as John stated, the storm surge isn't something you want to mess with. If you find yourself in the path of the storm and you don't or can't leave, the state of Texas offers a program that can help you get out of the way. It's called the STEER program, and Richard McBrayer, Victoria County's emergency manager, has more.
If you don't have the availability to move yourself, whether it's due to lack of preparedness or its economic means, you can call 211, which goes into the Golden Crescent Regional Planning Commission's call center, and you can be registered in as what we call STEER, to where services can be rendered to you. And so to help you evacuate, we would basically move to an evacuation center and then provide evacuation assistance to you. STEER is available right now. You dial 211, State of Texas Emergency Assistance Registration, Evacuation Assistance Registration. State of Texas Evacuation Assistance Registration is what it's called, STEER. And people can go ahead and call 211. They can register themselves for that when they don't have the means and or all the other preparedness cycle and planning efforts have failed. And so then what we would do is during the process of an evacuation that's being administered, we would reach back out to those folks. We check that list several times throughout the year. We call them to see if their needs have changed. And what we do is we provide basic services to them. We provide transportation services to the inland communities, to the shelters, and then provide basic sustaining, life-sustaining measures to them. Basic shelter, food, things like that.
Which brings us to having a kit and getting ready to go. Folks, when emergency managers tell you that you have to evacuate to leave town, you need to be smart and pack a go kit with you. What's that? A hurricane supply kit that has an ample amount of critical items should you have to go from the storm. Let's take a look at some of the supplies you need to have. Water. You need at least 1 gallon of water per person per day, and that means you have to have if you have a family of 4, you're going to be on the road for 3 days. You need to do the math. You're going to need 12 1-gallon jugs of water for the time you're on the road. Food, a 3-day supply of food that is non-perishable. Canned foods are suggested. Remember, you can take a can opener and utensils. Multiple changes of clothing. You're going to be away from your home for multiple days. Pack your clothes. And if you wind up at a shelter, you might want a sleeping bag and a blanket for each member of your family. And a first aid kit, a portable radio to keep tuned to the latest news and updates. Tools, a flashlight, good batteries, because when the lights go out, they go out and you won't be able to see. Keep an extra set of keys with you for your car while you're on the road. Extra credit cards and cash on hand. Remember, an ATM machine runs off electricity and might not have power. Special items for the young, the elderly, and disabled family members, anywhere from an extra supply of diapers to walking canes and walkers is recommended. And finally, medicines for you and your family, both prescription and non-prescription. Now, there are other items you might need we haven't mentioned here, but have a plan and stick to it. Coming up next, the big reveal: how many storms can we expect in the Atlantic Basin this year, and how many will become major hurricanes? All right here on Hurricane Season 2015, what you need to know.